recording. And let's have at it.
Okay. Look, I look forward to these moments of catching up with you, Lewis, and really appreciating your support and energy around just a few of the things in relation to the writing that Wiremu and I have been doing. Now, I'm not sure whether you've had a chance to read through a sort of portion of a chapter, which is sort of about 7 or 8 pages, that pertains to Lakota visionary experiences and healing, mostly about visions and voices. Did you get a chance to have a look at that?
You know, sadly I didn't, but we could look at it now.
Yeah. What I'm interested in, so what time have you got till today?
Well, I probably have about an hour, because
Okay, that suits me well. I need to finish at that time myself.
Okay.
And if for you it needs to be less than that, that's fine. It just helps me figure out in my mind how to divide the time up. I was wondering if we could spend half our time for you having a read through that, and then I'm interested to hear from you. Is there material there which you feel uncomfortable about the way it's been expressed, or you think I've got some? Mostly, I've been writing this, and Wiremu's going to have a look at it. But have I misunderstood what the idea was, or is there any kind of discomfort that you have about the writing of it? I would really like to hear, because you've got much more experience, near sense about the Lakota traditions, obviously. The second thing is, I would also be interested to hear your thoughts as a psychiatrist about, from your point of view, with your knowledge of both spaces, do you think this is actually meaningful material for us as psychiatrists to be thinking about a bigger understanding of what voices and visions might be, rather than just psychotic? So that's the second part that I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, and of course any of your thoughts, any of your comments would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can address the second part quickly, which is,
yeah,
I think it's crucial that we, as psychiatrists, that we be open to larger realities than just the material. That you know, for too long, we've been bound by this positivist, materialist, reductionist worldview, and we need to open our awareness to the mystical, the transcendent, the transpersonal, the spiritual. And at the same time, we can remain aware that not all visions are healthy visions, and that disorganized brains produce disorganized output, and that we can work at that interface of understanding the difference between, you know, a vision and a disorganization, and so it seems to me that I mean, from a philosophical point of view, we could believe that disorganized people who are psychotic could be receiving valid information from other dimensions, and they don't know how to organize it or interpret it or even make it into a story. And but that doesn't mean it's not valid. It's just unintelligible. And I think maybe that's a better definition of psychotic, is disorganized and unintelligible, as opposed to fantastic and unbelievable. And I mean, I just think that we have to work toward a more multidimensional view of reality, a more sort of view that's compatible with quantum physics. And I'm often brought back to Stuart Hameroff, who's an anesthesiologist who runs the Center for the Study of Consciousness at the University of Arizona. And he says that it's all in the microtubules, and that we blink in and out of this dimension 52 times a second. And that's so fast that we don't notice that we're gone 52 times a second, that we're somewhere else, we're in some other dimension. And he says, but it's the only way to really understand the quantum behavior of the microtubules, which is more than I understand. And he says that the Buddhists figured this out 2,000 years ago or more, and came up with the same number, which he finds amazing. And so I think as psychiatrists, we have to be open to multidimensional reality, and at the same time realizing that some people are perceiving multidimensional reality through trauma, through brain disorganization, and it's terrifying to them, and we have to help them. And you know, one of the ways we help them, well, one of the ways we help people is to give them structured environments, which nowadays we call hospitals, but they could be other environments. And another way we help them is, of course, through medication. But you know, I think that's really important. And in terms of Black Elk's visions, I don't see any reason not to accept them as real. You know, he lived in a time when visions were more common, and people didn't know, people weren't so trained that they couldn't have visions. And so it was just more matter of fact in those days. And I mean, that was one of the amazing things about him, were his visions. And I think you're describing it well. You're describing it as Neihardt wrote it, and as Black Elk recalled it.
I'm just going to get it up in front of me on a different screen.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important too that Black Elk said that the meaning of what he was shown only became evident as he grew older. And people today are impatient to know the meaning of visions immediately. And we have to work against that tendency. We have to understand that sometimes these things take time, and they could take a lifetime. It could take 60 years to understand a vision. So
there's a paragraph there. It is not possible to adequately summarize in a few sentences the many intricate events Black Elk experienced in his vision. I felt uncomfortable with trying to paraphrase his vision. Do you feel that that's acceptable, that paragraph?
I think so. I think so.
Because I've missed out heaps of details, which are all probably important, but tried to keep in the grandfathers and the 6 directions, and the powers to, including the power to heal. A lot of other powers as well.
Yeah. I think, you can't, given the scope of the book, it's fine. You've said enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't feel that I've misrepresented the material in writing like that?
No, no.
I was actually really interested in the first experiences he had, and astonished that he could remember what was happening so clearly when he was like 4 years old or 5 years old. The experience with the kingbird.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Because that wasn't even his main vision, but it was interesting in the way it pointed towards it with, the 2 men, for example.
Yeah, I wonder if people had better memories in those days because they didn't have television or books. So they had to remember better.
I also think there's something really interesting about a spiritual experience. The fact that 60 years later he was able to recall in intricate detail everything that happened in his great vision. And he said it was like it remembered itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Which speaks to the power of it at the time, that he remembered it 60 years later.
There's almost some part of the spiritual power of it in the fact that it was indelibly on his memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think these experiences do embed themselves into the fabric of our memory strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're recording this, because I really liked what you were saying before and wasn't able to write it all down. So I'm glad.
Yeah, go Trent.
Yeah. Now the kōrero about the religious crimes code and all that.
About the what code?
Sorry, the religious crimes code. That's in the next.
Oh, yes, that's very accurate. I mean, the only thing that I saw was at one point you say peace pipe, and people would take objection to that. It would be, you could say sacred pipe, or the word in Lakota is chanupa, or you could say chanupa parentheses sacred pipe. But peace pipe is kind of it's seen as a derogatory term.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Chanupa, is that CHANUPA?
Yeah, it's typically, CHANNUPA, and the first N has a tail because it's nasalized. Chanupa. It's the right way to say it, but no one probably would know, and you can't really put a tail on an English keyboard. So.
Well, a tail, you mean like a something like that?
Yeah, it's.
Is it above?
Yeah, it goes down. So you have N and then it goes down below the line.
Okay.
It's a phonetic way of saying that the N is nasalized and,
Yeah.
and barely spoken. It's more of a signal to nasalized. But because there's
Okay.
two N's and one is nasalized, it's cha numpa, which really means two woods, which is kind of interesting because two woods refers to the idea that the communication through the wood is going in both directions.
This is excellent. I'll have a hunt to see if I can find the right kind of N for it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, if you
Yeah.
had a Lakota keyboard, it'd be easy, but I have a Lakota keyboard, so I can type these things in Lakota, but you could probably,
I'll
I
see
mean,
if there's anything in the symbols.
yeah, I'm sure that there's somewhere where Chanupa is written out with the phonetic language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. This is exactly the kind of advice that's helpful. So I'll look for that. I think that's in John Fire Deer's bit.
Right. I think so.
And
Yeah.
that I realized when I looked at that story that I'd left out the detail of the pipe. And in reading some of the other stories, I realized that's actually critical, or at least it's got a lot of meaning that might not have been that obvious to me when I was reading it the first time.
Right, because the pipe is the vehicle for spirit-human communication. You know, it's and that's another sense of cha, which is wood, or could refer to a tree. It connects the heavens and the earth. So the pipe connects the sky spirits with the earth, with the people, and so it becomes. And because it was brought by the white buffalo woman, calf woman, for that purpose, it becomes very sacred.
Mm.
And in that process of connecting the earth to the sky, there's a sacredness because the sky spirits are sacred. They're the Wakan Tonka. There's a number of translations for Wakan Tonka. Sky spirits is common. Great mystery is common. Wakan means sacred and Tonka means big. So the literal translation is big sacred. Wakan Tonka, sacred, really big.
Yeah. I really like that because it's more realistic about the dimensions.
Yes. And just as a humorous aside, so the word for New York City is Tushpa Tonka, Big Apple. Or Tatonka, big meat. And it's commonly translated as buffalo. But the word for buffalo literally means big meat.
So look, so do you think we need to change the translation there of Wakan Tonka from Great Spirit? That's under John Fire Deer.
Yeah, you might put in a footnote maybe that the Wakan Tonkan refer to the sky spirits, and of which there are 7, and that it's also that literally it means big sacred, and that other ways of translating it would be great mystery. I think the difficulty with Great Spirit is that it's singular.
Yeah.
and Wakan Tonkan is plural. And
Yep.
so there's a potential risk of strolling into Christianity, like the Christian one God thing.
Yep.
Which, I mean, the Wakan Tonkan are like a bunch of beings who all live in the sky.
Yep.
And so it's not a singular great spirit. It's big spirits, plural.
So what about great spirits?
Well, there's no real great spirit. I mean, that's a
But if
Christian.
we put an S on the end of great spirits, would that?
How about big spirits?
Yeah. Okay.
You're accurate. So there's no great spirit. There's a creator, which is Dakushkashka, which means the widest that is, which is an enigmatic phrase, really. Like that which is the widest is another way of saying it. Daku means that. And Shkashka is animate plural for white. So animate plurals are reduplicated. So if it's an animate and it's red, you say shasha. And if it's inanimate, then it would be just what, wouldn't reduplicate like that. So so great spirit, and many people interpret it, Dakushkashka, as meaning like beyond the dawn, because there's interesting cross-cultural comparisons. So the Wabanaki here, Wabanaki is often translated as people of the dawn, but what it really means is people of the whiteness. And so there's something, and maybe whiteness could also be translated as brightness. So maybe it's that idea that creator is on the other side of the brightness, that comes with the dawn.
Yeah.
I think that's a way of thinking about it. But almost never in North America is creator gendered. And almost never is creator close at hand. And creator is usually fallible and not omniscient nor omnipotent. Powerful, but not all-knowing. And typically, creator throws it all together and sends a representative to Earth to fix it. So in Maine, it's Glooskap. And in the Southwest, it's first man and first woman. And in the Northwest, Coyote plays a role. And in Cherokee, in the Southeast, Vulture is involved in fixing creation. So, and one really interesting thing is that, so the animals are always present, or are generally present at the time of creation, which is kind of fascinating. Like in the Anishinaabe, there's Old Man or Nanabojo. And when Nanabojo sets out to create the world, animals are already with him. And so where did they come from? And that's the beauty of the stories, is that the seeming contradictions are there for us to puzzle and to avoid thinking that we've got it all figured out. Because we don't.
Thank you, Lewis. I just wanted to what was the name for creator? in Lakota?
Dakushkashka.
I might need to get you to email me the spelling of that.
It's DAKU SKA in with a tail, SKA in with a tail.
SKA in with a tail.
Dakushkashka. I'm not the greatest Lakota pronouncer in the world, but I'm working on it. And one of our friends, who is an excellent pronouncer, frequently makes fun of my pronunciation. But I'm working.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm wondering whether you would be okay at the end of the section for us to have, I guess, an extended paragraph where you're commenting on your perspective as a psychiatrist on some of these stories.
Sure. Yeah. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
And I might just talk about how, we had a conversation about it and then I invited you to comment, because it feels not appropriate for me to comment. But it would be very nice, I think, for the reader to hear how someone who's a psychiatrist might make sense of this.
Yeah. And I think for me, it when you think about it, a fundamental question we ask is, well, does it bother you? Does it cause you distress? Or is it a positive force in your life?
Yeah.
And in all of these accounts, it's not anything that tortured them or distressed them.
I think I'm really interested in that aspect. And in a way, if we have a look, I mean, I don't know whether you had a chance to read the stuff about residential schools, which I think is pretty standard.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. I mean, it's accurate and pretty standard. Probably.
And then Mary Crow Dog's account.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of twisted a little bit at the end, because I'm trying to make a case for the fact that she could have heard babies and mothers screaming and been distressed by it.
Yes.
But she's actually, she knows the history, she's on the land, and she's surrounded by people who will help her make sense of it.
Right.
And so I'm sort of, I guess, pushing the envelope a little bit with that. But I'm trying to say, if you don't know the history of the land and you don't have an elder who can help you know that, yes, of course, if you go to that place, you're going to hear something unpleasant, that kind of idea. It's kind of about indigenous knowledge being important. Does that material about Mary Crow Dog sort of sit together okay for you?
It does. Yes. And I think you're absolutely right on that Mary Crow Dog could manage her experiences because she was surrounded by elders and friends who could help her make sense of that experience. And it was a shared experience that,
yes,
that others had heard it and could tell her their perspective. And I think that's that's part of the contemporary problem, is social isolation. And when people don't have others around them who can help them make sense of their experiences, they could have a tendency to just sort of drift off into craziness, by just amplifying what happened.
And their fear in relation to it.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a paragraph that starts, if a young Indigenous adult was to present to mental health services hearing voices and sounds similar to those of Mary Crow Dog, I would invite readers who are clinicians to consider how well might we be able to help them make sense of those experiences. How often might we as clinicians interpret such experiences as psychotic or dissociative if we have no awareness of the history of the land they are on? I believe it would be very difficult to guide this person and their family satisfactorily without Indigenous local knowledge. This would usually be best provided by elders, healers, or experienced clinicians Indigenous to that area. And then I've mentioned Brian Burkhart that I got from you. Do you feel that that's an okay way to express, to, I guess, bring in the idea of, so what do we make of this as a clinician?
I think so. I mean, I think, I think as clinicians, rather than focusing on, oh, you're hearing voices or visions, I would focus on, so how is it that you're suffering? And are these voices and visions potentially helpful to you, or are they increasing your suffering? And if they're increasing your suffering, then where are they coming from? Who are they? That notion of giving all voices ontological validity, and saying that they exist, and and we need to define them, we need to understand them. And I think we can do that even as we potentially prescribe medication for voices that are so distressing that people want to kill themselves. We can still, I think it's always important to think through the origin and the source of the voices or the visions, and that it gives people power over the voices and visions to know their origins and to know what sort of spirits are they. And I mean, that it's really difficult to quiet all the voices for people. One almost has to give them so much medication that they spend their day drooling. And it's much easier to give medication to reduce the intensity of the voices, and then to work with the voices to understand their origin and to stand up to them and overcome them.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's probably not the mainstream perspective anymore. But I remember when I was in training reading a book called Unbearable Affect. It was by a professor of psychiatry at Rush Presbyterian Medical Center in Chicago. And his point of view was that the point of medication is to bring the level of suffering down to where people can do psychotherapy. And I would replace that maybe with healing, but it's I think it's a lot more effective, regardless of what we do in terms of medication, to help people to manage their voices. Sort of the work that Adrienne Giacon does with the Healing Voices Network in New Zealand. And she is Maori and comes at it from a Maori perspective, in her work with people who contact the Hearing Voices Network. And that would be my sense, is that we can do so much more for people if we work with them and their voices, as opposed to just trivializing the voices and the messages and just attempting to completely suppress them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Lewis. Coming back, I'm just slightly mindful of the time. There's a section. I've got a slightly different question for you. It's about the Mary Crow Dog reference to not wanting to go to the hospital in Pine Ridge Reservation because her sister had a cesarean section there and then had been sterilized without her consent.
That was happening. That was
Yeah.
coming. Yes.
And in some ways that wasn't a detail that's immediately relevant to Voices and Visions, but it's utterly relevant to the context of, I guess, racism.
Yes, and the kind of wholesale genocide that was rampant at the time.
So in the next paragraph, I've tried to put some words to that, and because part of me, I'm realizing, to give a whole lot of details of colonization of Indigenous peoples is not that fun to read if you're Indigenous and you already know it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important, I think, for non-Indigenous people who don't have a clue to realize actually there are lots of layers going on here. So that's why I was kind of saying I've pondered whether to include this last detail, wondering if it might be painful for Indigenous readers. At the same time, it's an example of practices that seem to have their origins in theories of eugenics, or what is more commonly referred to as white supremacy. At the same time, for those of us who are non-Indigenous practitioners, awareness of our histories of our own professions' unjust practices towards Indigenous peoples may help us understand the resulting mistrust Indigenous peoples may have towards health services. It may sharpen our realization of the need for decolonising attitudes and practices to help us consciously foster more just relationships in the future.
I think that's right on. That's spot on.
Do you feel like that reads well enough? It just feels like a thorny territory to express.
No, I think it reads well, and Indigenous readers are fully aware and can skip over it if they want. And it's important that everyone know about this because it's been hidden. I mean, it's been concealed. And I think a potential reference for you is Thomas King's book, The Inconvenient Indian. And he has an amazing chapter about all the massacres that took place early.
What's the name of the author?
Thomas King, K-I-N-G.
K-I-N-G, Thomas King,
Yeah.
okay.
The Inconvenient Indian. And what he's referring to is like how inconvenient it was that there was someone in the way of taking over the continent. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I'll look that one up. I've looked up a lot of the references you've given me and they've all been helpful. It's a statement, I was wondering whether it might be painful for Indigenous readers. Again, do you have any kind of negative feeling about that sentence, about it being patronizing or anything like that, or does it feel okay?
No, it feels okay. It feels okay. I mean, you're acknowledging that sort of awareness of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Now, Joseph Eagle Elk, I'm using a certain detail, which is that he had his first vision in a dream when he's 7, and his grandparents could have advised him but decided not to. And I'm sure they did it for very good reasons. Do you feel that I've expressed that in a sensitive way that doesn't sound like I'm blaming them?
Yeah, I think it comes across that they were trying to protect him.
Good, thank you. And then I'm going on to say that he's had, he's had voices and visions, and some they might have been in this dream. And then he has decades before someone's able to help him make sense of it, during which time his life was not straightforward, and he may well have suffered. And I'm trying to say, in reflecting on his narrative, I'm left wondering what would happen if a young person from an Indigenous background was to be seen by mental health services. Let's imagine he was brought into the mental health service with anxiety or low mood, maybe as a teenager or young adult, when their distress might have been expressed in other ways. Could we as mental health clinicians respond in a culturally appropriate and useful way? If not, why not?
Well, I suspect you and I could. I don't know how many others would. I mean, because it all comes down to, do you accept that there's more than humans in the universe? Which is a kind of interesting term that I got from Melissa Nelson, who's an ecofeminist, about the spiritual dimension. And if we believe that more than humans exist, then we take it a step further and say, well, they probably communicate to us. And if we're not prepared for that communication, we could find it quite frightening, especially if they're really insistent on speaking to us. If they purposefully and with a purpose want to tell us something and we're fighting it or resisting it or fearing it, that could be distressing. And so I can imagine that the role of a psychiatrist or a mental health professional could be to figure out, well, what are they trying to tell you? What are these beings trying to communicate? Like, what do they want you to know? And I think that's what Wiramu did with one of the cases that you guys talked about, with the breaking of the taboo, that the ancestors wanted the young man to know that he needed to put the thing back that he had taken. And yeah. And so they were trying to tell him something potentially helpful. And when he put the object back and sort of undid the breaking of the taboo, or kapu, is that the word in Maori? Kapu?
Yeah, tapu.
Tapu. Yeah. Then they stopped bothering him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ecofeminist you were talking about, Lewis, what was the surname? Is it Nelson? Nelson?
Yeah. Melissa Nelson.
Melissa with an M.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Do you think that question hangs together and feels kind of appropriate as to intervene as a psychiatrist and saying, well, here's a thought experiment. What if he turned up to a local mental health service? Could we help him? I
think that's a great thought experiment. Or would we make him worse? It's sort of the corollary to that question. And right now, I think most of us would make him worse. Because we're so ingrained that to dismiss the non-material, to dismiss extraordinary experiences, and to say, well, that's delusional. I mean, we're sort of the police of rationalism, and it turns out that rationalism isn't working all that well in a number of other fields, including ecology and anthropology and sociology. And it's probably not working that well in psychiatry either. But we're so committed to it, we're so committed to the rational worldview. And we just, we have to work on that. I mean, that's what you're doing with this book, right? Is
Yeah.
challenging the rational worldview that this is all nonsense. That this is all like superstitious silliness, which is a kind of epistemological genocide in Megan Bang's terms, that when you tell people that the way that they view the world is idiotic and primitive and incorrect, you're really attacking in a genocidal sort of way their whole cultural way of knowing. And that's quite violent. In that sense,
it's interesting, Lewis.
Yeah.
I've gone hunting in Megan Bang's articles for a quote about epistemological genocide, and I haven't actually found that. But she talks about epistemological violence, and so I'm just, do you have off the top of your head, would you know where that quote might come from? I imagine she said it online as well.
Yeah, it could have been from a talk that we heard her give, but let me see if I can find it. It's a phrase that's often attributed to her. Let's see. Let me see if I can piss.
I tell you what, Lewis, I'm wondering if, having asked you that question, I'm wondering whether we could park that one.
Yeah, and we could look into it later. I mean, I could write her. Yeah. I mean, we know her not well, but we know her.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting, because I've included her as a reference, but it might be possible to sort of just, I mean, what you just said before was a great summary of the police of rationalism. So I guess a question that I'm wondering about is, does it seem like there's value in documenting, putting down on paper a summary of some of these visions of these Lakota holy guys, mostly?
Yeah.
Lakota healers, in order to inform a broadening of thinking in psychiatry. Because some might say, well, yeah, but these are separate. This is culture, but it's not relevant to psychiatry. And I'm just hoping to demonstrate that it is relevant.
Who could talk? You could look at Matthew Ball's work, because he's not indigenous and was psychotic and got over it. I mean, found a way.
What's his surname?
Ball.
Okay.
And he's written some. He's not written widely, but he's written some really interesting things. And he runs a clinic in Adelaide for people with psychosis called the Humane Clinic. And he talks about, he talks about these issues in relation to himself and they're equally relevant, and he's not indigenous.
Okay, I'll have a look for him.
Yeah.
For you as a psychiatrist, and obviously you've got a foot in both camps, does it feel like it's useful to articulate in detail these indigenous perspectives and that they hopefully might force or at least open up some space for a different way of thinking about voices and visions.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think we need that. That even if you can't allow for non-material dimensions, even if you can only see the voices and visions as metaphors, there's incredible value in working with the metaphor. And because, metaphors make it possible to move something from one place to another that otherwise couldn't be moved. And, my favorite example of metaphors comes from the Athens airport in Greece, in which the luggage carts are called metaphora because it's a Greek word and it means literally to move a tool that allows you to move something from one place to another. And so
Very
metaphors,
nice.
metaphors allow us to move things from one place to another. So even if you see the voices as a metaphor, they still allow us to move the trauma or the wounds or the psychological distress into an arena in which we can work, in which we can dialogue with it. And we can talk back to the voices. We can give them bodies and shapes, and we can explore their, their existence, what they have to communicate. And so even if you don't believe that they have any ontological validity, I think we could argue that they have metaphorical validity, and working with metaphors is incredibly therapeutically effective. And so why not accept them? Because the work is similar, for the most part, the work is similar whether you believe they're metaphors or real. The only difference might be, if you believe that they're real, you might act on the messages that they give you. Though you might still do that if they're metaphors. But like I'm thinking of Weramu's example of putting the thing back that broke the taboo, the tapu, as a way of calming down the ancestors. I mean, I could see how someone could take that as a metaphor. I mean, I would believe it. I mean, I would say, yeah, that makes sense. They're angry. Do what they say. But even if you don't believe in them and you did what they say, well, behavioral activation, right? So when you do something, you get better. When you take action, you get better.
Lewis, I'm mindful of the time and I don't want to keep you past what's possible. I'm hugely grateful for this. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the transcript from Trent. He's a great guy.
We like Trent.
And I've utterly failed to divide the time up. So I didn't actually get us on to the next document.
I'm happy to talk again. It's fun talking to you. I'm enjoying.
Oh, look, I'd love that.
Yeah. Let me look through my schedule. This seems like a good time for me. Hopefully it's a good time for you. Because I know
next week I'll be working on Thursday.
Okay.
But I won't be on Friday.
So that would be my Thursday?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, let's see. Thursday is the 23rd. And we're going to be, let's see, let me think about the time difference. We're going to be driving to the border. We're trying to cross the border for Christmas into Canada to visit Barbara's family. And so
Okay.
we have to get negative COVID tests. And the company guarantees the results in 48 hours. So we're going to be, and you have to have them done within 72. So we're going to be camping out Thursday night on the border, on the US side of the border, waiting for our results so we can dash across the next morning, which is
Okay.
Thursday morning, but we should be across. So Thursday, what about Thursday, say 5 my time, Friday 11 your time?
That will be amazing for me.
I think that'll work. Oh, it'll be, let's see. Let's say, yeah, so it'll actually be, let's say 4 my time, because where I'm going, it'll be actually 5. Because when we cross the border, it'll be an hour later.
Okay, so that'll be 11 a.m. my time.
Will
and
be 4 p.m. my time. I think that's how it goes. Is that how it goes? Yeah, because if I'm an hour later and you're the same,
which state will you be in?
I'll be in Nova Scotia.
Okay.
Let's see what Nova, do you have a thing that tells you the time? Mine only works once I'm in a time zone. Let's see. Here we can go time difference, Nova Scotia, Auckland.
I'm just going to ask Nova Scotia time now.
Oh, that'll work.
It's 6:12 p.m.
In Nova Scotia, right. Right.
So that means it'll be 6 p.m. your time at 11.
6 p.m. in Nova
Scotia.
So what time?
So if you wanted it to be 4 p.m. in Nova Scotia, that would be 9 a.m. here.
5 p.m. in Nova Scotia.
So 5 p.m. would be 10 a.m. here.
Okay. Okay.
Shall we do the 10 a.m. one?
Yeah, let's do that. This time is hard.
Yeah, but sorting it out's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Lewis.
Yeah, Nova Scotia by then.
And so would you be okay if we look at that other document next week?
Yes.
And
yeah.
I'll email it to you again just before.
Okay, that's perfect.
Second thing, Wiremu and I would like to do a recording the week between Christmas and New Year.
Oh, that would be really good.
So why don't we figure out a possible time for that when we meet this coming week?
Okay, good. Yes, because my sense is that the world will be sort of vacant, and so it'll be easy to pick a time.
Yes, I hope so. I'm working between Christmas and New Year, but I'm sure it will still be possible.
Yes, I am too, but I'm expecting many cancellations.
Yes. Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering what's the best way for us to finish. I'm happy to do a karakia, or would you like to do a song? What shall we do?
I'm happy to hear a karakia.
Okay. Ka te ariki, ka te tauira. Sorry, I'll start again. Ka rua. Ka te ariki, ka te tauira. Hui te marama, hui te oranga, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Just a brief explanation. Ma is about light. Ka rua, and rua is like a container or a for example, a healer in some way is like a receptacle for the spiritual realm. So Kamarua is about bringing the light into that receptacle, maybe. And Marama is about light again, and Oranga is around well-being. So it's Ariki, Kamati Ariki, it's about light coming into, I guess, the, I might not be able to find the right word for Ariki, but that includes elders, but also Tauera, which is like ordinary people or those who are visiting.
Cool. Very cool.
Shall we finish there, or would you like to finish us off?
I could finish off with a short song. Wakan tongan tunka shila bila maya yelo e wakan cha naikon. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting it. I'm tired. Barbara's there. Bila maya yelo e wichosani wa maya kuelo bila maya ye bila maya yelo e wakan tongan tunka shila wakan tongan tunka shila bila maya yelo e Wichosani wa maya kuelo bila maya ye bila maya ye, which is to say thank you. And it wasn't perfect, but it's late in the day. So
thank you so much for your time and for your singing and your generous words, Lewis.
thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, my love to Barbara, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay.
And good luck with getting across the border.
Yes, thank you. We'll need a little bit of luck, probably.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.